Daddy? Will Mommy come back? That question, uttered in the dead of night, felt like a punch to Jackson Monroe's chest. He was a millionaire, able to sign a multi-million-dollar check in seconds, yet he didn't know how to answer his daughter. 3 years had passed since his wife's death, and he had buried himself in work building his empire to drown out the sound of Emily's nightly sobs in the small room where she still waited for her mother. But that afternoon, in the biting Chicago rain, he pulled into a tiny cafe, not for the coffee, but because he could no longer bear another day watching his daughter grow up alone. The black SUV rolled slowly along the rain-slicked sidewalk of Lincoln Park, where old red brick buildings stood silent amid a row of maples changing their leaves. Chicago wasn't bone-chilling today, but there was a certain iron-cold edge to this melancholy afternoon with no apparent cause. Inside the car, Jackson Monroe kept his hands on the wheel, his gaze distant as if he had no idea where he was headed. Beside him, 6-year-old Emily sat silently, clutching her worn teddy bear to her chest, her legs swinging just above the floor. She said nothing. There was no need. Jackson had grown accustomed to that silence. It was the haunting soundtrack of his nights. The faint sighs, the soft rustle of blankets in an empty bed, and eyes always fixed on the window as if waiting for someone to return. He had it all. A brilliant career, a net worth north of $100 million, a penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan, and a name splashed across every business column. But the moment Emily stopped smiling, he realized he was losing what mattered most. That afternoon, as the SUV prepared to merge onto the highway home, his eyes settled unexpectedly on a quiet street corner. Amid the gleaming towers of steel and glass was a small vine-covered nook, warm yellow light filtering through frosted windows onto a hand-carved wooden sign, Harper's Haven. There was no plan for that afternoon, no clear reason. Jackson simply turned in. Emily looked up when the car stopped, her eyes widening at the tilting sign. She didn't ask questions. She unlatched her door and stepped out, the soft click of the safety lock echoing behind her. In that brief moment, Jackson felt something stir within him: curiosity, hope, or simply the long-lost sensation a father had forgotten. The wooden door creaked open, and the aroma of freshly roasted coffee and warm cookies washed over their senses. Inside, the space was small, cozy, and peaceful as though time itself had slowed. A gentle acoustic guitar drifted through the air, reflecting off exposed brick walls and a glossy wooden counter. Hand-painted artworks lined the walkway, potted plants hung at angles, and a child's giggle floated from a corner table. No one recognized the man who'd graced Forbes's cover. Here, Jackson Monroe was just a father with his daughter. They chose a table by the window where raindrops traced paths down the glass like tears not yet shed. Then, Ava appeared. In a sand linen apron, her hair loosely tied back and her smile unguarded, she approached their table as if she'd known them forever. No introductions, no formality. Just a knowing look and a greeting so warm Jackson felt his throat go dry. Emily hesitated but didn't step back. She pointed to the chalk-written menu board where it read, "Magical chocolate pancakes for brave little princesses." Ava leaned in and whispered something just for the two of them. Emily burst into laughter. Not the polite chuckle she forced for strangers, but a ringing laugh that shattered an invisible wall. Jackson froze. How long had it been since he'd last heard that sound? The pancakes arrived, glistening under a glossy chocolate sauce and sprinkled with marshmallow bits like fresh snow. Emily dove in, drawing pictures on the napkin between bites. Jackson didn't touch his coffee. He was too busy feeling something that hadn't visited him in far too long. Peace. On a Chicago street corner, amid the afternoon rain and the sorrowful guitar, something had begun, quietly, gently, and profoundly real. But could a pancake soothe a once-shattered heart? Or was it merely a fleeting magic?
Welcome to 30 Millionaire Stories, where success meets solitude, and every story heals a hidden wound. Subscribe and discover the heart behind the fortune.
The next day, Jackson Monroe did not go to the office. No meetings, no calls to his assistant, no replies to emails from the Hong Kong shareholders pressing for a deal. For the first time in a long while, he set his phone to silent, cleared his calendar, and simply showed up. That afternoon, Chicago's sky was still veiled by a thin, mist-like layer of clouds drifting past the car window. Emily sat in the back seat, clutching her sketchbook, no longer wearing her usual shyness. She even hummed a fragment of a tune, something only her mother had ever heard before. Jackson watched quietly through the rearview mirror, a tenderness in his eyes he could not name. They returned to Harper's Haven not exactly for the pancakes or the coffee, but because yesterday, for the first time, he'd seen his daughter truly come alive. Not merely existing amid expensive toys, but being like a real child, with laughter in her eyes and hope budding within her. The cafe was unchanged. Warm golden lights, gentle acoustic guitar, the scent of cookies lingering in the air. Ava Harper was wiping down tables when they entered, and in her eyes flickered a surprised warmth as though she hadn't expected them back, yet secretly hoped. Jackson let Emily choose their spot. She picked the corner table where the late-day sun streamed through the window, slanting across the dark wooden surface. Ava brought a mug of hot cocoa and a small cookie, placing them softly before Emily, then moved on to pour Jackson's coffee without asking. It was as if she remembered. Emily opened her sketchbook on her own. Her first strokes drew a small house with windows thrown wide, a maple tree shedding golden leaves beside it. On the lawn stood two figures holding hands, one wearing an apron and one a girl with curly hair. Above them, the sun was painted in blazing orange with touches of pink imperfect, but exuding warmth. Ava glanced down and lightly tapped the corner of the paper. She smiled quietly, paused in thought for a moment, then nodded gently. It wasn't praise, it was recognition, and perhaps the first step toward healing. No one pressured anyone to speak, but amid the rising steam of coffee, Ava began to share not too many details, and, without embellishment, she had once been a pediatric nurse at St. Paul's Hospital, where the cries of children mingled with ventilators' beeps as daily background. Her son Jared was her whole world. One night, he ran a high fever while Ava was closing a shift. The sitter panicked. By the time Ava raced home, it was too late. Her story was brief but left a strangled echo. Ava did not cry. She spoke in a calm, even tone like someone who had learned to live with pain, much as one lives with an unerasable scar. Afterwards, she left the hospital not out of dereliction, but because each pristine hallway reminded her of Jared. She opened Harper's Haven not to run a business, but to have a place to truly live. Jackson sat in silence. He-Man, accustomed to solving everything with logic and strategy, sat there, feeling something no market report could quantify, pain that needed no comparison to be acknowledged. Emily continued to sketch. She had moved on to fill in a flower garden beside the house. Jackson saw something he'd long forgotten. Rebirth begins in small things. A scribbled picture, a non-judgmental glance, a familiar seat, and gentle sunlight. They did not speak of their own stories, yet somehow, three soul-broken men, a grieving mother, and a girl who had stopped smiling, found one another, not through words, but through presence, wholehearted and sincere. Perhaps here among naive drawings and the still warm scent of cookies the past began to be forgiven. But would this peace hold firm against the noisy world outside? Dear viewers, I have a small favor to ask. Please like this video, subscribe if you love uplifting stories, and don't forget to comment below telling me, where are you watching from? And what time is it where you are? It warms my heart to see the whole world come together to share a meaningful moment. Fragile peace was uprooted before it could take root. One weekend morning, when Jackson parked outside Harper's Haven as usual, a silver sedan was silently waiting across the street. Inside, a paparazzo's camera finger hovered over the shutter, snapping shot after shot through a telephoto lens. A tiny flash lit up just as Jackson bent to brush Emily's hair back, and Ava smiled softly, hand wrapped around a steaming cappuccino. One tap of the send button, and a few hours later, the world they'd been quietly building no longer belonged to them alone. The first headline exploded on a tabloid site: "Billionaire bachelor Jackson Monroe spotted with unknown barista true love or PR stunt." The photo was grainy but familiar enough for those who followed Jackson's career. The public stormed in no time for facts, only gossip and sensationalism. Scathing comments aimed at Ava. "A coffee girl and a millionaire? As if she isn't in it for the money. She's playing him." Others lambasted Jackson. "A CO must guard his image. He's tanking the stock for a cheap fling." Yet amid the uproar there were voices of support. "It's the first time I've seen him smile genuinely. What's wrong with a father choosing love over power?" Inside the 38th floor offices of Monroe Enterprises, an emergency meeting was convened. In the glass-walled boardroom, directors and PR advisors delivered crisis reports in turn. A slight dip in stock price triggered a cascade effect. The company's history held no record of private matters impacting operations until today. An email landed in Jackson's personal inbox with an unmistakable subject: "Immediate strategic adjustment required." The body was brief but razor-sharp, instructing Jackson to cease public contact with Ava Harper immediately, to stabilize media relations and protect brand image. He read it again and again, not out of surprise, but because something inside him shattered the helplessness even money couldn't solve. He was used to making decisions for thousands, moving markets with a word, yet now he couldn't secure one thing: ensuring Emily didn't lose the light she just found. That afternoon, he still drove Emily to Harper's Haven. But this time, the cafe doors remained locked and dark. No tinkling bell, no scent of fresh pastries, no Ava, no note. No trace left behind. Emily hesitated on the steps, clutching her half-finished drawing. In it, the little house where three figures once held hands was now smeared in cold gray. The lines were tangled, as if she didn't know where to begin or end. All that evening, Emily said nothing. Dinner grew cold. Colored pencils lay scattered, untouched. She turned to face the wall in bed, her teddy bear abandoned at her feet, as if there was no one left to hug. Jackson sat alone on the sofa, the warm lamplight casting shadows on his anguished face. He had thought himself strong, but no-faced with his daughter's hollow gaze, all his power, fame, and stocks felt pitifully small. He didn't know where Ava had gone, nor could he be sure she would return. But one thing he knew: a decision meant to protect his reputation had wounded the smallest heart in this story, the deepest. Would he choose to stand by his daughter, or continue living by the rules the world expected of him? Night fell over Chicago with a silence that offered no comfort. No car horns, no rain, just a stillness so acute that even the ticking of a clock sounded harsh. In the penthouse atop the lakefront tower, Jackson Monroe sat alone in his study. His laptop screen glowed with hundreds of unread emails lining up like a cold column. Stock prices wavered slightly. Market confidence indices remained in safe territory. Yet his mind no longer cared about those numbers. He switched on a desk lamp, its warm glow illuminating the framed photo at the corner of his desk, Emily beaming at a rare picnic from years ago. Jackson stared at the picture, then rose quietly. He padded to his daughter's slightly ajar bedroom door. Emily slept clutching her worn teddy bear, a pink blanket drawn up to her shoulders. On the nightstand lay an unfinished drawing, broken lines, washed-out grays. Jackson gazed at her delicate face, her lashes stirring with each even breath. Something tightened in his chest, not boardroom pressure, not the unspoken threats of the board, but a cold truth. His daughter was losing faith both in this world and in him. He had once believed he could balance everything, run a billion-dollar enterprise, manage the media, be a good father, and maintain a flawless image. Clearly, that was an illusion. The harder he tried to control, the more he lost what mattered most. A cold breeze drifted in from the window. Jackson closed the door, returned to his desk, and opened his email. He reread the board's message from the previous day, concise, yet weighted. Then he clicked Reply All. No exclamation points, no apologies, simply carefully typed words, each weighted with love and regret. I hereby resign as CEO of Monroe Enterprises, effective immediately. I trust the current team to continue our mission. My reason lies not in business strategy, but in something no balance sheet can measure: family. The next morning, as the virtual board meeting began, a grid of tense faces appeared on screen. None believed he would follow through. A few urged him to delay until the situation stabilized. But Jackson did not waver, not even an inch. He sat upright, his voice steady, his gaze unnervingly calm. No attacks, no blame. He spoke only of Amelia, little girl who once laughed like morning light and was now learning to hide her feelings in silence. When the meeting ended, he closed his laptop. The room was startlingly quiet, but now, without torment. Minutes later, small footsteps sounded in the hallway, and the door swung open. Emily burst in, her curls wild behind her, a radiant smile reborn on her lips. She leaped onto the sofa and threw her arms around Jackson. No questions asked, no explanations needed. Somehow she knew her father was not going anywhere. In that moment, he felt his daughter's heartbeat against his chest and knew he had made the single best decision of his life. Within hours, social media exploded. Headlines blared, "Jackson Monroe steps down for his 6th year. Old daughter and a heart that needed healing." Twitter buzzed with analysis videos sprouting like mushrooms after rain. A reckless move or true devotion? Giving up everything for a daughter, romantic or insane? Outside, the world remained divided. Skeptics on one side, admirers on the other. But at the center of it all was the quiet strength of a man who once believed in control, now learning to believe in letting go. And at the heart of that choice lay one simple truth. When your daughter needs you, there is no negotiation. You show up. Dear viewers, please take a moment, grab a glass of water, and stay tuned for the next surprising developments. Comment 1 if you found this story moving, so we know you're still here. The first winter morning after Jackson's resignation dawned over Chicago with a strange quiet. No back-to-back meetings filling every hour. No relentless email pings yanking Jackson out of the present. Instead, there was the scent of fresh pastries from the little kitchen, the scratch of colored pencils on paper, and somewhere the sound of a child's laughter and echo that had long been absent in the penthouse, once stiflingly silent. On a Monday morning, Ava Harper returned to Harper's Haven, not as the quiet cafe owner hiding behind the counter, but walking in freely. Emily ran to her and threw her arms around her tightly, as if she never wanted to let go. Jackson, standing behind the glass door, watched in silence, feeling a long-held sigh finally release from his chest. From that moment, the small things began to find their place again in a home that had grown too vast and too cold. Ava moved into a room on the lower floor of the Monroe residence, where the morning sun streamed through the curtains each day, waking all three of them in gentle golden light. She didn't change their world. She quietly brought into it a soft vitality Jackson had never realized he was missing. Her mother's old recipes soon became their familiar breakfasts: buttered toast, creamy corn chowder, ginger cookies. Emily sat perched on the kitchen counter, legs swinging, chatting and laughing as she kneaded dough with tiny flour-dusted hands, and no one in the house told her to stay still anymore. In the afternoons, they painted in the backyard. The once plain brick wall became a gallery of Emily's artwork. Sunflowers, the little house with 3 figures, even a portrait of Ava watering plants. Each painting glowed with bright colors, as if Emily were repainting her own life, one page at a time. Every weekend, the 3 of them went to the children's center where Ava once volunteered. Jackson, once accustomed to million-dollar board meetings, now learned to mix formula for infants, listen to tangled stories from children who didn't know whom to call dad, and understand that some things money can never reach. He no longer needed to play the hero. There, his mere presence was enough. Ava, in turn, quietly reclaimed the pieces of herself that had once shattered. With every sight of Emily running freely in the yard, and every night she heard Jackson read a bedtime story, Ava felt she was given a second chance. No one forced her to forgive herself, but the love of these 2 taught her to begin again, not by forgetting Jared, but by allowing herself to love once more. As for Jackson, one tranquil afternoon, while leaning on the balcony watching the sun spill over the garden, he realized no deal in his career had ever made his heart flutter like the morning he first heard Emily's unprompted, "Daddy." No contract could rival the look in Ava's eyes when she wordlessly poured his coffee, knowing, without asking, how he took it. Life did not shift in a grand fireworks display or triumphant fanfare. Instead, day by day, little by little, they rediscovered simple joys together. A good night wish, a shared meal, a sincere presence. And in those seemingly ordinary moments, a home took shape, built not by blood or promises, but by small, steady, heartfelt acts. Yet has the past truly been laid to rest? Or is something still waiting quietly for them beyond the door of this newfound peace? A soft layer of autumn light spread over the mirror-calm surface of Lake Michigan that late afternoon. A north wind drifted through the lavender pots scattered across the penthouse terrace, carrying their gentle fragrance to every tabletop and linen. The scene was unostentatious. No media crews, no stage lights or elaborate decorations, just the ones who truly belonged here. A small, steadfast, complete circle. 7 years old. A milestone ripe enough for memories to start taking shape, and just old enough for Emily to understand that not everyone in her life would stay forever. But today, she wasn't thinking of those who had left. Her clear eyes looked only forward, toward the grand castle-shaped cake waiting to be topped with flickering candles. No one reminded Emily what to wish for, and no one was surprised when she softly said, "I wish our family will always be happy." A breeze whispered just as the candle died, as though the sky itself nodded in agreement. Applause rose, measured and gentle. No ruckus, no fanfare, only the quiet joy reserved for what is truly precious, emerging after much loss. The celebration continued with simple fare: creamy corn soup from Ava's recipe, and batches of cookies that Emily and Jackson had baked together in their familiar kitchen. The music came not from speakers, but from an old cassette player Ava had kept since her youth random acoustic tracks, a little out of tune but utterly sincere. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting an orange glow across the lake, as if all wounds were softening in the evening light. When everyone was gathered, and the silence among loved ones became comfortable rather than awkward, Jackson rose and took a simple craft paper-wrapped frame from beside him. He handed it to Ava without a word. She unwrapped it slowly. Inside was Emily's drawing, 3 figures holding hands beneath a blazing sunset. Every face was rendered with care, each curved line around the eyes, each chosen hue, not perfect, but silencing in its authenticity. Above the scene, in Emily's unsteady scrawl, were the words, "My family, Ava stood still, fingers tightening on the frame's edge, eyes glistening. No explanation was needed. Everything that mattered had been spoken through shared days, through every embrace, through every storm weathered together. Jackson gently touched her shoulder, his voice barely above a whisper, meant only for her. "Thank you for bringing magic back into our lives." Ava did not answer at once. She inhaled deeply, gathering all the pain and brokenness of the past, then spoke words meant not just for Jackson but for herself. Love and forgiveness are the true magic. As darkness fell, candles were lit across the terrace. Their golden glow danced on each face. Emily nestled between the two adults she called Dad and Ava. No one was apart, no one left behind. The family camcorder, set quietly on a distant tripod, word, on recording nothing but smiles, a gentle leaning of heads, hands clasped, as if the outside world no longer mattered. The camera panned slowly. Jackson rested against Ava, his gaze more peaceful than ever before. Emily tilted her head on her father's shoulder, her small hand clasping Ava's. And then, at the bottom of the screen, the words appeared. Sometimes love heals the deepest wounds, and family is the greatest choice we can make. Sometimes life makes us forget what truly matters. A warm look, a midnight call of Daddy, or someone who stays when we are at our weakest. Jackson, Ava, and Emily's story is not just about love, but a reminder that forgiveness doesn't make us weak. It expands the heart enough to welcome a new beginning. If you have ever lost someone, felt alone in a crowd, or longed for a real home, believe that quiet miracles are still finding their way to you. And that family, sometimes born not of blood, but of chosen love, awaits you each day. Thank you for staying with this story to the end. If you see a reflection of yourself in this journey, please leave a comment below. Share your feelings or a memory you've lived through. Don't forget to tap the heart, share this video with someone who needs a bit of healing today, and follow us so you won't miss the next touching tale. Because sometimes what we need most is simply someone who stays.